The report that President Trump asked Matthew Whitaker if he could put a Trump supporter in charge of the SDNY investigation has a lot of Democrats demanding to know whether Whitaker told the truth in his testimony before the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman Eric Swalwell is on the committee, and he joins me now. So good to have you here. Thank you so
Tom,
much.
Thanks
what
for
do you
having
think of this New York Times report?
Well, I never thought the acting attorney general was worthy of being taken at his word, and that we should test his accounts that he gave us, because it was contradicted by New York Times and other press reporting. And now this story today shows that we need to get him back in. We probably need to hear from other witnesses and subpoena other documents.
If these allegations are true, is that obstruction?
Oh, yeah, I mean, geez, obstruction was like, 10 exits ago with, most of these characters. Yeah, I mean, it's really, what can we do to intervene and make sure that, the rule of law, which is the long pole in our tent of democracy, still stands. I mean, at this point, Don, we have to just make sure that rule of law is standing. And how do you interdict?
So let me ask you, do you believe, or do you have evidence that Whitaker shared information of the Mueller investigation with the president?
No, but we asked him, had he done that? And he said no, but there were other instances where it didn't appear that he was very truthful with us. So that's why I think bringing him in under oath, this was a voluntary interview, bring him in, under oath, under subpoena, and then be able to, confront him. And as he tries to say, oh, I can't answer this because of an executive privilege, well, then we need to start pressing those privileges, and maybe it'll have to be litigated. But we shouldn't, if we don't bring him back, I think the administration will just try and steamroll us through the rest of the 2 years on other witnesses we need to hear from.
You're not saying perjury, right? Do you think he perjured himself on?
Well, I'm not taking him at his word. I'm not, because there's still too many lingering questions, and his account is contradicted by press reporting.
And you want him to come back?
Yeah.
You want him to come back. Okay, so you're on the House Judiciary Committee. He testified earlier in the month. Very contentious, some of it right here.
Did the president lash out at you after Michael Cohen's guilty plea for lying to Congress about a Trump Organization project to build a tower in Moscow?
The president specifically tweeted that he had not lashed out.
I'm asking you, Mr. Whitaker, did the president lash out at you? I'm not asking you what he tweeted. I don't have a lot of confidence in the veracity of his tweets. I'm asking you under oath.
Congressman, that is based on an unsubstantiated...
Sir, answer the question, yes or no. Did the president lash out to you about Mr. Cohen's guilty plea?
No, he did not.
Have you spoken to the president, Mr. Whitaker, about the Mueller investigation?
Congressman, as I have previously testified, I did not talk to the president about the Mueller investigation.
Have you ever spoken to the president or parts of his legal team about information that you've learned in your capacity as acting attorney general related to the Mueller investigation or any other criminal investigation involving the president?
Congressman, while I have specifically been saying that I'm not going to comment about my conversations with the president or his senior staff, I have also been very clear that the president has not instructed me to do anything.
I said that wasn't my question. My question is, have you had conversations about what you learned? That's a yes or a no.
All of that stemmed from, by the way, all of this stemmed from CNN, this explosive reporting that we got that he lashed out after these revelations from Michael Cohen. Watching that now, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, again, we're not asking these questions because of palace intrigue. I mean, of course, we expect that there's going to be discord at any office. We're asking that question because if the president lashed out after Michael Cohen is arrested and he's trying to put in a different investigator to oversee that investigation, he's abusing his power. So, we have to make sure that, the people know the stakes here, that this isn't just some interest in a fight between two people. But what the New York Times reporting shows, with multiple witnesses now and the McCabe book out, from McCabe to Comey to Cohen, it doesn't matter what the vantage point is. Mm-hmm. When you look at the scene of this crime, it's pretty clear that the president is an obstructor. He's someone who tampers with witnesses. He's someone who's not honest with the American people. It doesn't matter who the perspective comes from. They all tell the same thing.
Why not just answer yes or no?
Yeah.
Why not just say no? He didn't.
Someone who had nothing to hide would say no, or it would ring of truth if it didn't happen, because he'd say no, that wasn't.
That never happened. According to a justice official, Whitaker, his new role is he's in the Associate Attorney General's office at the Justice Department.
Sounds like a no-show job, right?
I don't know what it is, but what kind of role do you think he'll play there?
Well, he's not immune from congressional subpoena, so we're going to hear from him. It doesn't matter what he does. He's not escaping responsibility on this.
Yeah. Not when you going to decide anything?
Well, Don, I was just in Iowa before we went on air. You're giving me grief about my shoe game because I didn't wear snow boots and they're all messed up. I feel like I let you down tonight.
Okay. That means you're not going to answer.
Yeah, not tonight.
Thank you, Congressman.
My
I
pleasure.
appreciate it. The big question tonight is, do the president's actions rise to the level of impeachment? Someone who knows a lot about that is here to discuss. John Dean weighs in next.
Lemon.
Can you explain to me, what does lasagna of lies mean?
When you make a lasagna, you start
throw
with
everything
one
in?
layer of pasta,
Okay.
then you have the meat, then you have ricotta, then you have some more cheese, then you have some sauce, and then there's another layer of pasta. And then there's more meat, and then there's more ricotta, and then you have some more cheese, and then you have some more sauce. And you build it more and more and more, and that is the lasagna of lies that we are dealing with on this probe. Do you understand?
I'm going to put matzo balls in the equation in a minute, but you go ahead.
Carl Bernstein is saying it's like a matzo ball of lies. It's all. What say you two?
It's a goulash of lies.
Chinese food.
Because,
you know, that's.
I
Jewish
say
people
from
eat
the South,
Chinese
Chris, it's a gumbo
It's a
of
gumbo?
lies. It's a jumbo. No, it's a jambalaya. How about
L-I-E-A. Don's got the vapors.
I do have the vapors tonight. It is funny. So let's talk about this. There is this bombshell report, and I think you're onto something. In why then? Why keep going back at it? Why keep going back at it if there is absolutely nothing there in terms of collusion, in terms of obstruction, in terms of let's just say any impropriety?
Right. Look, I mean,
Why take so much action?
And Jeffrey and Carl, the perfect guests to talk about this with, but they're going to rely as a political defense on the two C's: credibility and criminality. They're going to say you can't believe any of these other people. Now, I think they're hurt doing that with this particular president. I think it's going to be hard to show that he's more credible than other people who are going to come up in the mix. And the second one is going to be, but none of it is a crime.
Yeah,
There are no crimes.
I don't disagree with that.
But I
think-
don't know that that's going to be enough
Yeah.
for political analysis, because a felony is not the level of acceptable political behavior. Anything that's not a felony is fine. I don't buy that.
Well, I just remember when you were on in the morning, you would say, and I would say it at night, I think that people expect on either end of the spectrum too much from this Mueller report, right?
Yeah, I
They
do.
expect too much. The president, one group thinks the president's going to be let out of the White House in handcuffs. He's going to end up in an orange jumpsuit. And the other side say, oh, he's going to be all roses and flowers, and everything is going to smell like Glade air freshener, and it's going to be great. And everyone, it's going to be none of that. It's going to be somewhere in the middle, and people should just brace themselves. If you love him, vote for him in 2020. If you don't like him, vote him out in 2020, and then he's gone, and then he'll have to deal with the rest. Do you think I'm wrong on that?
I don't. Look, I mean, we could both be wrong. There could be some real earth-shattering things. I just don't know why Mueller wouldn't have acted on them before now. Maybe there will be another wave of action by him. We keep hearing these whispers that it's closer to the end than the beginning. But so putting aside that surprise, I think that you don't have a massive prosecution of the president coming up here. I don't even know if it's possible. But that doesn't mean that this could not be crippling to him politically.
Agreed. I've got to run, but I think you're right.
Yeah, you've got better guests. Don't waste your time.
No, I'm not. But I'm just saying, I think you're right when you said, when you talked to Kellyanne, you said, listen, credibility and trying to call people liars, that is not a good option for you.
Oh, you know what?
considering.
I'd love your guys' take on if you want to work it into your conversation tonight. I was shocked that Kellyanne said at the end, well, I don't know that we're going to see a report. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
She wasn't exactly right in terms of her analysis of why there's one not required, but that's a very frightening proposition.
Yeah.
We're going to be at a real jam, my friend, if
Yeah.
we don't get what happened in that Mueller probe. That will not be good for this country.
You got to watch more. We talk about that.
I'm just telling you, she just said it. I watch you
We
too
were
much.
before her. Thanks, Chris. I'll see you soon. Got a lot to get to. See you tomorrow night. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Here is our big story tonight. We have new revelations about the lengths President Trump reportedly went to trying to stop one of the investigations threatening his presidency. Here's what the New York Times is reporting. That he called then acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, the man he handpicked for the job, by the way, the man whose main qualification seemed to be his criticism of the Mueller investigation. He called Whitaker late last year to ask whether a Trump supporter could take charge of the Michael Cohen investigation in the Southern District of New York. The president denies it.
Mr. President, did you ask Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker to change the leadership of the investigation into your former personal attorney, Michael Cohen?
No, not at all.
Took him a minute to answer, didn't it? So let's face it. It's no coincidence that the president reportedly wanted to try to put Jeffrey Berman in charge of the Southern District of New York of the investigation of hush money payments during the campaign. Berman, the U.S. attorney for the Southern District, had recused himself, which was the right thing to do. Why? Because Berman contributed to Trump's campaign. He served on the transition team, and he is a former partner of Rudy Giuliani. All good reasons to recuse himself. But essentially, the president wanted Berman to unrecuse himself. And we know how he feels about recusals. Ask former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He'll tell you. Where's he now? So while the president was saying this in public,
It's a total witch hunt. I've been saying it for a long time. It's a witch hunt. That's all it is. Witch hunt. Witch hunt. Witch hunt. Witch hunt. So far, this thing's been a total witch hunt, and it doesn't implicate me in any way.
so he's saying that in public, and the Times reports that behind closed doors, he was trying to take action to tamp down the investigations. Whitaker, in his testimony before Congress earlier this month, said this.
At no time has the White House asked for, nor have I provided, any promises or commitments concerning the special counsel's investigation or any other investigation.
Excuse me, he said he never provided any promises or commitments, which leaves a whole lot of gray area for having conversations with the president. Whitaker then went on to dance around questions about the content of those conversations.
Mr. Liu asked you if you ever communicated with President Trump about investigations in the Southern District of New York. Instead of answering, you referred him back to your statement, referred him back to what was written for you. But all you said is that you didn't make any, or statement that you didn't make any promises or commitments to President Trump. I want to know whether you talked to President Trump at all about the Southern District of New York's case involving Michael Cohen.
Congresswoman, as I've mentioned several times today, I am not going to discuss my private conversations with the President of the United States.
Dancing around the questions. Hat tip to CNN legal analyst Ellie Honig, who points out that three of this president's key picks, think about this, William Barr for Attorney General, Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court, and Matthew Whitaker for acting AG. Why were they chosen? They were all chosen after they argued against investigations of the president. Sure, Matt Whitaker claimed that he didn't talk to anyone in the White House about the Mueller investigation.
Congresswoman, just to be clear, you're asking me whether or not I talked with anybody essentially in the president's circle or at the White House about my views of the special counsel's investigation.
Correct.
When I was a private citizen
Correct.
and not at the Department of Justice?
Correct.
No, I did not.
Okay, look now, I have pointed this out before if you watch this show, and I think it bears repeating, so pay close attention. Whitaker didn't have to talk to the president about Mueller, at least not in person or on the phone, whatever. You know, he got his messages across right here on the live TV, right here on this show.
I could see a scenario where Jeff Sessions is replaced with a recess appointment, and that Attorney General doesn't fire Bob Mueller, but he just reduces his budget so low that his investigation grinds to almost a halt.
That was July 2017. Just 2 months later, Whitaker was named Chief of Staff to then AG Jeff Sessions, later taking on the job of acting AG when Sessions was fired by the president. So it sure sounds like the president got the message. And then there's Brett Kavanaugh, who wrote in 2009, "We should not burden the sitting president with civil suits, criminal investigations, or criminal prosecutions." And don't forget William Barr wrote a lengthy memo arguing against prosecuting the president for obstruction of justice, which sure didn't hurt his chances of getting the job of Attorney General.
Some have said, on both sides, that it looked like a job application. And so that's what I want you to refer to.
That's ludicrous. If I wanted the job and was going after the job, there are many more direct ways of me bringing myself to the president's attention than writing an 18-page legal memorandum.
It kind of worked, though. Barr is now Attorney General, just the way the president wanted it. So here is the question tonight. If you had nothing to hide, would you try to put an ally in charge of the investigation of your former fixer and keeper of secrets? If you had nothing to hide, would you stack the deck of the Justice Department and the Supreme Court with people who'd argued against investigating you? Would you do all of it if you had nothing to hide? Now, the question is, what is the president hiding? What is he trying to hide? This exchange from Anderson Cooper's interview with Andrew McCabe might make you wonder.
Do you still believe the president could be a Russian asset?
I think it's possible. I think that's why we started our investigation, and I'm really anxious to see where Director Mueller concludes that.
Let's talk about. Carl Bernstein is here, Jeffrey Toobin. Maggie Haberman of the New York Times joins us too, next. So tonight, in an extraordinary interview, the former acting FBI director Andrew McCabe telling Anderson Cooper it's possible that President Trump is a Russian asset. I want to talk about this now with Carl Bernstein, Jeffrey Toobin, and joining us by phone now is Maggie Haberman of the New York Times. Good evening, everyone. This is extraordinary, Jeff. The acting director, former director of Andrew McCabe, just spoke to Anderson. Let's play it, and then I'm going to get your response. Here it is.
Do you still believe the president could be a Russian asset?
I think it's possible. I think that's why we started our investigation, and I'm really anxious to see where Director Mueller concludes that.
So, I mean, we're talking about a sitting president of the United States. If there's any thought or anything that this president is a Russian asset, why wait for a Mueller report?
Well, he did what he could. I mean, McCabe started this investigation, and remember, when he started this investigation, Michael Cohen had not yet talked about the fact that he was negotiating with the Russians during the campaign over Trump Tower Moscow, at the same time he was praising, the candidate was praising Vladimir Putin. I mean, the argument that, or the possibility that the president was a Russian asset has only gotten greater over the past 2 years than when McCabe first made opened that investigation, which is even more chilling when you think about it.
Yeah. Before we move on to Maggie's reporting, Carl, I just want to get to your reaction to what McCabe is saying, because Kellyanne Conway responded telling Chris Cuomo that McCabe is a known liar. But the president's actions over the last 2 years.
Well, let's take, you got three things going on at once. First of all, Kellyanne Conway talking about a known liar is its own dynamic. And what McCabe lied about was talking to the press. An FBI person talking to the press in a way, incidentally, that damaged Hillary Clinton and helped Donald Trump. I'm going to be the last person here to denigrate FBI people, given my experience with Deep Throat, et cetera, for talking to people in the press. Yeah. But more important, this extraordinary thing that McCabe said tonight on the air. He's not the only one at the highest levels of intelligence and counterintelligence in this country to have said it. John Brennan, the former CIA director, has also said it. Director Clapper has also indicated in the same direction. The real question, and we can see certainly that the president's actions as a candidate and as president indicate that he has enabled himself one way or another to be manipulated by the Russians and by Putin. Whether that is witting, half-witting, or unwitting, we don't know. But his actions would indicate that his conduct, it's one of the reasons that Mattis decided that the President of the United States is a danger to the national security of the United States, that McMaster decided the President of the United States is a danger to the national security of the United States. All of this is a matrix that tells us how extraordinary this is, both in regard to the competence of the President of the United States and to whether he's capable of serving in such a way as to represent the real interests of the United States of America.
Maggie, I want to turn to your reporting now, and I've been reading it. It's really unbelievable. The president calls his acting AG, Matthew Whitaker, back in November to request the Southern District of New York attorney and Trump ally Jeffrey Berman to really unrecuse himself from the Michael Cohen investigation. It's another example of the president attempting to get a perceived loyalist in charge of an investigation that involves himself. Walk us through what happened.
Sure, and that's exactly right, Don. I mean, this is part of a pattern that we saw, certainly in 2017, where he tried repeatedly to have Jeff Sessions unrecused from the Russia probe, and the probe into possible campaign collusion with Russian officials. So, as we understand it, and according to multiple people, there was a conversation where the president, this is around the time that Michael Cohen had pleaded guilty to lying to Congress. And remember, what he lied to Congress about was the duration of time that the Trump Tower Moscow project was going on. He had initially suggested it ended in January. In his courtroom statements, he said it went to June. Around this time, the president asked Whitaker if it was possible for Jeff Berman, who is the prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, to unrecuse from the case. Berman had recused because of some matter involving his former law firm, and this was decided by DOJ ethics officials. As far as we know, it's not clear what Whitaker did after that, but clearly Jeff Berman did not get in charge of that case again, so it does not appear that Whitaker did a whole lot. But again, even the fact of asking fits a pattern that we have seen with the president over and over. His lawyers would say, look, he's allowed to ask questions. This is what he's entitled to do. He's entitled to, to raise questions sort of in defense of himself, as long as it doesn't cross a different line. Other people may have a different interpretation of it.
So, listen, CNN previously reported that the president expressed anger to Whitaker about the Cohen investigation. Why did the president ultimately sour on Whitaker?
So the president ultimately, everybody starts out at a certain stock price with the president when he first appoints them to something, and you can only go downhill from there, particularly if he doesn't see you on television. He became frustrated. I don't think that he has turned on Whitaker. Whitaker is allowed to remain at DOJ right now. I'm not sure how long he'll be there, but he is still working there despite not being the acting attorney general anymore. But it became clear that Whitaker was not getting done what he hoped he could get done, and we had heard from multiple people around the president that they had believed there was more he could have been doing to try to keep the Southern District in line. The Southern District of New York is known as the Sovereign District of New York because it is fiercely independent historically from the DOJ, and you're seeing that again now. Again, we have all said this many, many times, but the Southern District of New York investigation poses a far greater threat to the president than the Mueller probe does.
Yeah, you believe that too, Jeffrey?
I'm not sure. I think the Mueller probe presents a great threat too. But I mean, I think Maggie's extraordinary reporting, it does establish that the president is very concerned about the Southern District probe and went to the incredibly inappropriate step of asking Whitaker to change the leadership of that probe. Whitaker, whether out of morality or practicality or for whatever, it didn't apparently clearly.
That's what I was going to say.
That.
So it's not exactly clear what he did, but here's the quote he said. But he does tell associates that prosecutors in New York needed, quote, adult supervision. It's not exactly legalese. What does that mean?
Well, I'm not entirely sure what it means. I think he was trying to mollify the president and say, well, we need to stay on top of things without actually telling him that he was changing leadership. Is that right, Maggie? What does that phrase mean to you? I was a little puzzled by that.
That is exactly what it meant to me. I think that it was basically having conversations with other officials at DOJ. I think there was frustration that the Southern District was doing things that were beyond DOJ's control. And I think part of this, as Jeffrey correctly says, was about appeasing a deeply frustrated and often mercurial president who was, as Jeffrey also said, very animated by this probe in the Southern District, which, remember, is the one that is threatening to go into his business, into his company, into the inaugural committee. His lawyer has basically gone to war, Rudy Giuliani, with the Southern District of New York, an office Giuliani used to lead. So he knows very well how prosecutors take it when they get essentially the stakes raised, as the president's lawyers have done. I think that there is a desire by SDNY to run a fine-tooth comb through everything Trump-related, and the chances that you find something are relatively high.
Good, Carl.
Well, it's a terrific story that the Times and Maggie have done. It's from 2 points. One, it's a wide-angle lens story in which the Times has pulled back, and looked at the landscape of the last couple of years at one overt and covert suggestion and attempt at obstruction by the President of the United States. And then it leads with this most recent, rather astonishing, heavy, ham-handed attempt to manipulate, again, the investigation. I think we need to start looking, though, at, well, what is the effect of this in terms of where are we going? Because Donald Trump does not fear impeachment. He has told people impeachment might work to his favor, actually, because unless the Senate of the United States is willing to convict him of high crimes and misdemeanors, as it was in the case of Richard Nixon willing to convict, he can continue to lay this on Democrats, lay it on the press, lay it on fake news. And he's having considerable success in doing it. The fact that 35–40% of the country consistently has gone with him, and the Republican Party in Washington has not turned against his obvious obstructionism, demeaning of a legitimate investigation, tells us an awful lot about what's happening here, and his rallies in which he is calling the press, the enemy of the people, in which he is inciting his people to go after those who are conducting these investigations as illegitimate. That we really have a situation in which we're dealing with a demagogue.
Yeah.
And we've never had a demagogue in chief before.
I got to tell you, though, all good things come to an end, and sometimes it's just term limits. But all of that goodwill, that will come to an end, trust me. I'm older than you, I know more.
Yes.
Okay. We'll be right back. We're going to keep this.
New day, tomorrow morning starting at 6 Eastern on CNN.
We're back now with Carl Bernstein, Jeffrey Toobin, and Maggie Haberman. Let's continue our conversation. Now, Maggie, I'm going to go to you first. And talk to me about this. President Trump has asked his advisors whether Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein was intentionally misleading the president. About what?
The president has told advisors that Rod Rosenstein had told him that the SDNY investigation into Michael Cohen had nothing to do with the president. Now, whether that was true, whether Rod Rosenstein thought that was true initially, it strains credulity a bit because, things related to the payoff involving women connected to President Trump were mentioned in the search warrant of Michael Cohen's home and office and hotel room. But maybe it changed. Maybe that was true at the time. But regardless, that was something that the president stayed in the president's mind, and he has mentioned it to advisors on multiple occasions. It's funny, when the Times did an interview with the president a couple weeks ago, and I asked him something. I don't remember what my exact question was, but he said, Rod told me I'm not a target of the Mueller probe. And then I asked him about the SDNY probe, and he said he wasn't sure about that. I think he actually was getting them backwards. I don't think he has been told that he wasn't a target of Mueller. I do think that he had some indication from Rosenstein early on that the Cohen probe had nothing to do with him, and the president took that to heart.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey, Attorney General William Barr was confirmed just last week. Do you think that he looks into this, the actions that the president was taking?
No, I don't think he's going to get involved in this. I think he feels like, and I think correctly, this, as Maggie pointed out when you asked her earlier, what makes this story so significant is that it's a pattern. It's this constant effort to obstruct the Mueller investigation. Now it appears also to obstruct the Southern District investigation. But all of that is under the purview of Mueller. I mean, Mueller is investigating obstruction of justice, and I think Barr correctly will leave this whole issue to Mueller to reach the conclusions that he reaches, but I don't think he's going to get within 10 miles of it until he gets the report, which you will have to decide what to do with.
So let's talk about all of these things, because you've got the Southern District, you've got Mueller, you've got Michael Cohen. Why do you think he's so upset about Michael Cohen with the special counsel, with the SDNY, with the Attorney General? Why is he so upset about it?
Because he's got something to hide. I mean, because he's being investigated for things he doesn't want investigated. I mean, that seems pretty self-evident.
We were saying what is potentially more harmful to the president.
I don't think you can say that one is more harmful than another. He is enveloped.
Well, he could certainly get more exposure.
He is enveloped by investigation. But certainly the special prosecutor and the Southern District together are going at both financial and the Russian, quote, collusion aspect of this, as well as it involves his businesses in Russia. That is a big problem for this president of the United States because, among other things, he's got extraordinary conflicts of interest in Russia with ethno-Russians that make him subject to possible manipulation by Russians or Putin. Yeah. And that's part of the story that we're going to find out about.
I thought it was fascinating.
Or we'll be told, no, there's nothing there.
When I got the hat tip, I said in the open to CNN legal analyst Ellie Honig, who pointed out that the last three of this president's key picks, William Barr as Attorney General, Brett Kavanaugh for Supreme Court, and Matthew Whitaker for AG, all were chosen because they gave arguments against an investigation.
It is an interesting observation. Brett Kavanaugh, it was a law review article, so it was a little more abstract, right. But it was about how negative that investigations can be on the ability of a president to do his job. But as you showed on the air, the only reason that Whitaker was hired by the administration was because he was on our air. He was a contributor here attacking Mueller.
And the person who was on air with him that night said in the green room that he told him the whole plan was to come on air to talk to him, according to the person who was in the green room.
Whitaker is an extraordinarily unfit person to be the Attorney General or acting Attorney General of the United States. Barr, who's been criticized by a lot of Democrats and some expectation that they have that somehow he's going to bite the bullet for Trump. I followed him for a long time. I have trouble believing that in the last public act of his life that he's going to take one for the president who's involved in this stuff, that rather it's in his interest to see that the truth comes out here. And I'd be very surprised if he doesn't allow that to happen.
Maggie Haberman, I'm sure, I'm guessing that there's no surprise to you that the president denied your report?
Well, it's funny. So look at the two statements that were issued. I just want to point out that we went to the White House several days ago, and after repeated efforts to get comment, they decided not to comment, as they often do after being told the significant pieces of reportage in it, and then they choose not to engage. Then the president comments after. This is something that they do a lot in order to frame it as if they're hearing it for the first time. But it was interesting. The president denied it, but his initial denial was, no, I don't know who told you that, which is essentially, it literally was a version of that's not true. Where'd you hear it? And then he called it fake news, which is what he does everything. I think he said, no, I didn't. And that was the end of it. He did not get into this in depth. The denial from DOJ, which I think was a statement from Whitaker himself, did not say they didn't have conversation. That's right. It says that there were no promises or concessions made or something to that effect about the investigation. But it did not say that they didn't discuss this. And so I think that we've seen the president deny things that were true far more vociferously than he did this. Mm-hmm. People can make of that what they will, but we will stand by the reporting regardless.
Maggie, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yes, sir.
It's a lot. Jeffrey, before we go, how many more bombshell reports do we need like Maggie's? Because every week there's a bombshell report.
Well, you know, I mean, in a curious way, it's almost helps the president that there are so many bad stories that come out about him. It's very hard to keep up with him. I do this for a living, and I have a hard time keeping
People
up
get
with
lost at how unprecedented this is and how beyond the norms of not even just normal
That's
politics.
not to discourage this great reporting by the New York Times, but it is hard to absorb it all.
Yeah. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Matthew Whitaker's testimony to the House Judiciary Committee is under even more scrutiny tonight after the bombshell New York Times report. A member of that committee is here. Congressman Eric Swalwell is next.